Howdy folks, and welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, episode something, I don't know, 70, 71, something like that. What's been going on this week then? Well, Elite Dangerous newsletter number 39 is out, and in this newsletter they're expanding on what's going to happen with regards to exploring. Anybody can be the first to visit an uncharted system, but just stopping long enough to recharge your drive and then jumping out again doesn't mean you've explored the place. And what they're doing with regards to actually exploring, which is another way of earning a living in Elite Dangerous, is actually quite interesting. Properly charting and exploring a system is going to take time. You'll have to visit each major body in the system and scan the surface in great detail. Now, this is going to be valuable because corporations and governments are prepared to pay an awful lot of money for not just accurate star charts, but also mineral rights, biological survey rights, and so on and so on. So it can be potentially very, very lucrative. Unfortunately, there's a problem. It takes time. And while you're blasting out all across the electromagnetic spectrum with your ground-penetrating radar in order to do a survey of whichever planet in the system you happen to be in orbit over, anybody can detect you across the entire star system. And not everybody's particularly friendly. Somebody else might also be trying to survey that system, and they don't want you getting back to civilized space first with the survey data. So it's liable to be a very competitive, cutthroat business. So that's nice. Then, of course, there's the latest news about Star Citizen's Arena Commander version 0.9. It did, of course, miss PAX East. It wasn't ready. And in this week's Roberts Space Industries newsletter, there's another update on what's going on with Arena Commander version 0.9. And the update says, still not ready. Literally, that's it. It says, we're still working around the clock to bring Arena Commander to our backers. Great, thanks. Oh well. Never mind. Maybe next month, we shall see. Tomorrow I'm heading out of town on a spot of business. I've been invited along to, well, I can't say too much about it until after I've been there because I've had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. But there's a British games developer who are situated not too far away from me, who've asked me to come along and take a look at their current project. It's all top secret. I quite literally have no idea what their new game is. I can't even tell you who they are until after I've been to visit them. All I know at this stage is that they think it's something you guys might be interested in based on the kind of content that I put up on my YouTube channel. So I'm really excited to see what they're developing. The games company in question have had one quite successful game out on Steam. So I'm really excited to find out what they've got under their sleeves. So, more news on that as and when I'm able to report on it. Bearing in mind that I have signed a non-disclosure agreement with them, but they're going to let me show you something, otherwise what's the point in getting in touch with me? Showing off games is what I do. So, more on that as and when it becomes available. Later on this month, because I got quite a taste for it when I was at Gamescom, I'm going to EGX London, which is the Entertainment Gaming Expo. It bills itself as the UK's biggest and best gaming show. Well, that doesn't mean it's that big. I mean, it's British after all. It's kind of like the poor man's version of Gamescom. But it's here in the UK, so I don't have to, travel internationally in order to visit it. And I'm looking forward to that. I'll be there on Thursday the 25th and Friday the 26th of September, in case anybody else is going along to EGX London this year. So, and again, obviously I'll be taking the video camera along. And trying to get some footage of, well, I know that David Braben's going to be there, giving a conference on the development of Elite Dangerous, so I'm, pretty stoked about that. Also, cosplay, yay! And because I don't have to cart a Stormtrooper costume through airport customs as well as a replica blaster, which is always dodgy, I can just toss all this stuff in the car, so I will be going in costume for at least one of the days as an Imperial Stormtrooper, so... Aren't you a little fat to be a Stormtrooper? Yes. Get all the jokes out of your system now. So anyway, yeah. EGX London at Earl's Court. That's the 25th and the 26th of September this month. Well, those are the 2 days I'll be there. It's obviously on for more than that. So anyway, that's all the good news out of the way. And the bad news is that my internet connection has been acting up over the course of this last week. I've been experiencing some major packet loss, and it's making it practically impossible to play, well, you know, not just World of Tanks or War Thunder, any kind of online gaming, and online gaming is pretty much all that I do. I've been in touch with my internet service provider, Virgin Media, and they told me that apparently the cable in my area is oversubscribed. And at the time when I was on the phone to them, I ran a speed test, and I'm only getting 10% of my advertised download speed, and suffering massive packet loss as well. But they said, don't worry, they're upgrading the cable capacity in my area, and everything should be back to normal by the end of October. What? 2 months? You've got to be kidding. Nope, they're deadly serious. As you can imagine, this is making it somewhat problematic, not just for, well, playing World of Tanks and War Thunder, but for the regular live streams that I do on a Monday with Circumflexers and a Thursday with Quickie Baby. And of course, trying to get decent gameplay test server footage from the World of Tanks 9.3 test server of the new light tanks. So this is a major bummer. You know what it's like when, you know, you're having a great game and you're thinking, oh, this is going to make some fantastic YouTube footage. And then it's going great, and then right at the worst possible moment, packet loss, lag spike, dead. So, yeah. Nothing I can do about it, unfortunately, but I mean, I have some World of Tanks patch 9.3 videos up. I've had a look at the new updated Muravanka map. I've had a look at all the changes to the existing tanks that are in the game. Tanks like the KV-1S, the Hellcat, the Chaffee, and so on and so on. But just as an example, today being Sunday, the day I'm actually recording this episode of Mingles with Jingles, I spent 6 hours on the patch 9.3 test server, and in those 6 hours I had 1, possibly 2 games that were worth putting into a video preview of the new light tanks. The other games were just disasters, utter disasters. I was either getting team killed by angry Russian teenagers, or packet loss and lag spike were striking at the worst possible moments and just ruining the games. So it's been really frustrating, but nothing I can do about it, I'm afraid. On the bright side, however, there is always a bright side. My upload speed has not been affected, so the frequency with which I can actually upload videos every day hasn't changed, and I still definitely have more than enough footage to keep putting videos up every day. In fact, more than I can possibly handle. As always, the amount of emails that I get sent with replays is far in excess of my ability to process. But what it does mean is that anything new from the patch 9.3 test server might be problematic getting my hands on that kind of footage. Speaking of replays, brings me on to the first question of the week. This question comes from Moldwing. He plays World of Tanks on a crappy old laptop on the lowest possible graphics settings, and even then he only manages to get around about 18 frames per second, although often it will go lower than that, especially when he's driving fast tanks like the ELC AMX. He wants to know, if he was to send me a replay, would the replay look as crappy on my computer as it does on his? Moldwing, short answer, no. Long answer, the quality of the visuals on a replay, and this applies to games like War Thunder as well as World of Tanks, the quality of the visuals depend entirely on the graphics settings and the power of the computer on which the replay is being run. So even if the best you could achieve was 5 frames per second, and despite that you somehow managed to have a good game and you thought, you know what, I'll send that into Jingles, when I watch the replay, it looks fantastic. Sorry about that. But the good news is that all you guys out there with substandard gaming computer setups, when you do have a really good game, it doesn't matter how bad your system is. When I come to put it in a video, it's going to look amazing. So you don't need to worry about having a substandard computer setup, thinking that, well, there's no point in sending this into Jingles because it's going to look useless. I have a good machine, things look great when I play them, and your replays also look great when I play them. He raises a good point though, particularly with World of Tanks, because it's not particularly well optimized for modern computer systems. It still doesn't have multi-core support, for example, and often the speed of your CPU is the bottleneck in how far you can crank the graphics up. People that do have substandard gaming systems, that's got to be a real limiting factor in the kind of tanks that you can play well. Stick to the big, slow, heavy tanks and you can probably manage to play those with some degree of success, but the second you switch to anything fast, like an ELC AMX, 5 frames per second, very little control over where the tank's going, terrible performance, shitty games. And particularly with patch 9.3 in World of Tanks, basically showing off these incredibly fast, manoeuvrable, agile light tanks, and that's all that's really, new. There's got to be a lot of people out there with below average computers thinking, oh, great, World of Tanks, patch 9.3, more tanks than I can't play. But this actually got me thinking. Moldwing asking this question, particularly in relation to my problems that I've been having with my internet service provider, which has been basically losing me games left, right and centre over the course of the last week. Games like World of Tanks, games like War Thunder, free-to-play games that can be played by people that don't have an awful lot of spare cash to flash around. The kind of people that probably don't have top-of-the-line gaming PCs, that are probably playing on substandard business laptops that aren't optimised for gaming. And there were a couple of people that raised this point in last week's Mingles with Jingles during the whole argument about whether or not win rating was an accurate measure of personal skill, when you're playing games like World of Tanks and War Thunder. But they kind of got drowned out in the whole argument. There's got to be... how many of you out there are actually playing these games on machines that aren't really up to the demands that these games impose on your system? And how badly is it affecting your ability to play a good game? Or to, phrase the question in another way, a very blunt way, how much is having a bad gaming rig a factor in your being bad at World of Tanks or War Thunder? How many of you out there are playing on systems that barely qualify as gaming machines, and as a direct result of that are experiencing problems outside of your control that basically make you bad at games? And I do choose my words very carefully here. I'm trying not to give offence to anybody, but I'm kind of experiencing the same thing for myself for the first time in ever, because of the crappy performance of my internet service provider with the oversubscribed cable access in my area. 6 hours I played World of Tanks on the patch 9.3 test server, and in those 6 hours I had one definite game that was worth putting into a preview, and another one that maybe I could use bits of it. I was actually having a pretty good game until lag struck and ruined the game for me. And I know that there's a substantial number of you out there who are in exactly the same situation, not for the same reasons, but because it could be. The important thing is that it's a situation outside of your own control, and it doesn't just have to be a crappy computer or a crappy internet service provider. You could be disabled, you could be partially sighted, you might even have motor neuron disease and just find it very difficult to control a mouse and keyboard. And it pisses a lot of you off when you're being lumped in the same basket as all these clueless twats playing World of Tanks and War Thunder who are just idiots and couldn't find their own arse in the dark without the aid of a map and a flashlight. But you've got the same stats as them, but it's not your fault. But here's the thing, and this is why I really do need to choose my words very, very carefully here, because I'm liable to offend an awful lot of people. It doesn't matter what the reasons are. Well, it matters to you, but it doesn't matter to the guy with a 56% win rating who is looking at your 400 WN8 rating at the start of the match in XVM and going, oh god, a team full of tomatoes again. As far as he's concerned, if it looks like a bad player, sounds like a bad player, smells like a bad player, and performs like a bad player, then you're a bad player. The important thing is that there's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to suddenly wake up one morning and not have motor neuron disease. You're not going to suddenly wake up one morning and find that the computer fairy has been and has left you a $1,000 gaming rig where your crappy old business laptop used to be. You do have a shitty computer. You are not going to get a better computer, and you are therefore always going to have shitty stats in World of Tanks. Not because there's anything you can do about it, but because you've got a shitty computer, and you are constantly going to be lumped into the same category as all of those terrible players who haven't got a clue what they're doing. And that's really got to suck. I mean, and I'm experiencing a small taste of it myself with my internet service provider woes over the course of the last week. I mean, I've been playing games where I know I should be able to do better, but, you know, when you lag out, there's nothing you can do. But that's no consolation to everybody else on my team. Not when I'm a top-tier tank. It doesn't matter to them why I sucked. What matters is that I sucked and cost them the game. So I'm curious to know how many of you are in this sort of situation. Intensely frustrating though it may be, the fact that there's nothing you can do about it is the kicker. You know, somebody who's just bad at games can always get better. They can all start paying attention to what they're doing. They can start reviewing their replays. They can, oh, actually, yeah, that wasn't his fault. That was me. Oh, I won't do that again. But there's nothing you can do if you've got a bad computer or a disability. Doesn't matter how much you review your own performance. The limiting factor is not you. It's the hardware you play on or the disability that you suffer from. How many of you are in this sort of situation? I'd really be interested to know. Well, anyway, moving on to another subject. I think I talked that one to death. Last week's Mingles with Jingles, one of the questions that I was asked was which 3 people, alive or dead, would I like to have my back in a bar fight? And I asked, I asked you guys to come up with your own suggestions, and there were some, some fairly predictable ones: Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, and so on and so on. But the one that really caught my attention, purely because it was so unusual, and because so many people nominated this fella, was Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States of America. I thought, what the hell, you're having a laugh. Then I went and looked up this guy's biography, and holy crap, he was a real badass. At various points throughout his career, before he started campaigning for political office, he formed a volunteer army regiment called the Rough Riders, and fought at the Battle of Kettle Hill and San Juan against the Spanish. He'd been a sheriff, he'd been an outdoorsman and frontiersman, but the incident for which he's probably best known, this was amazing, I couldn't believe it when I read about this, was when he started campaigning for political office. In 1912 he was due to give a campaign speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when somebody who presumably disagreed with his policies rushed out into the street, pulled a pistol out and shot him in the chest. As he was an experienced outdoorsman and hunter, and he thought, well, I'm not coughing blood, so I'm probably all right. And he went on to give his speech. Stood up there for 90 minutes, giving a speech with a bullet in his chest. As the famous story goes, apparently, he was just such a man that the bullet couldn't penetrate his chest muscles. What had actually happened was that the bullet had gone through his steel eyeglass case, and then through 50 pages of folded over speech, and then failed to penetrate his chest cavity. But still, he was bleeding all over the place, and stood up on stage and thought, well, I'm not dying, well, screw it, and carried on giving his speech. They don't make politicians like that anymore. A couple of you also mentioned Carlos Hathcock. Now, I don't know what use Carlos Hathcock would be in a bar fight, but he was undeniably a badass. For those of you who have never heard of the man, he was a US Marine Corps gunnery sergeant and a sniper, and he fought in the Vietnam War. Carlos Hathcock's famous for 2 reasons. A lot of you have probably seen various different war movies. There was a famous scene in Saving Private Ryan, for example, where Private Jackson's got his M1903 Springfield rifle, and he's spotted a German sniper in the clock tower of a village, and the two of them aim at each other, and Jackson fires first, and his bullet goes right through the sniper scope of the Mauser Kar-98K and blows the back of the head off the German sniper. Yeah, movie bullshit. No, Carlos Hathcock actually did that. Hathcock had such a fearsome reputation as a sniper that the North Vietnamese army put a bounty on his head. and numerous sniper teams went out into the bush in the areas that he was known to be operating, trying to find him, kill him, and claim the bounty on his head. They even gave him his own nickname. They called him White Feather, because he had a small white feather that he used to wear in the bush hat that he wore when he was out on operations. None of them ever claimed the bounty. He killed all of them. One of them, an infamous NVA sniper who was known only by his nickname of the Cobra. It sounds like the plot of a movie. The Cobra resolved to kill Hathcock, and this was the incident, with the whole bullet through the sniper scope thing. Now, you know what US Marines are like. These guys look after each other in an absolutely hardcore way. What actually happened was that when news of the bounty on Hathcock's head went out, and it became apparent that sniper teams were coming to the area to try to get him, and looking for White Feather, a number of the Marines started wearing white feathers in their headgear to decoy sniper teams away from Hathcock. A number of Marines had been shot by a sniper, and it became apparent that somebody was out there, this Cobra guy was out there specifically looking for Hathcock, so Hathcock went out to find him. The Cobra and Hathcock and his spotter were stalking each other for hours when Hathcock noticed a glint of light coming from the bushes hundreds of yards away. Immediately zeroed in on it, pulled the trigger, it went right through the sniper scope of the Cobra's rifle, blew the back of his head off. Hathcock took his rifle as a trophy, tagged it, turned it into the armory, and some arsehole stole it. Typical. The other thing that Carlos Hathcock was famous for is the longest recorded sniper kill in history. One day, also in Vietnam, a bunch of Viet Cong were quite casually, knowing that they were outside of rifle range, quite casually walking across a dike over the top of a paddy field, and Hathcock, knowing that he couldn't hit them with his rifle, mounted a telescopic sight to the top of an M2 50 caliber machine gun, and firing a single shot at a range of 2,500 yards, quite casually killed one of them. That record stood for over 30 years before somebody eventually beat it. And that somebody was Master Corporal Aaron Perry of the Canadian Princess Patricia's Light Infantry Regiment. He held the title for only a few days before another man in his own unit, Corporal Rob Furlong, beat his distance with a shot of 2,657 yards in March 2002. The current world record is held by the British Corporal of Horse Craig Harrison, who recorded a shot of 2,707 yards in 2009 during the war in Afghanistan. He admits that the weather was perfect at the time. There was no wind, very little haze, it was a nice warm day. He took a couple of ranging shots at two Iraqi machine gunners, and once he was happy that he had the range to the target, he killed one of them, setting a new world record, and then he killed another one slightly further back, setting another new world record, and then with his third and final shot he knocked out their machine gun. The distance? 2.474 kilometers. That's 1.5 miles. At that range it takes the bullet 3 seconds to hit the target. It's 1,000 yards beyond his rifle's recommended range. Absolutely ridiculous. And yet the thing is, without wanting to rubbish the achievements of some of the guys making these incredible shots at ridiculous ranges, sniping is a science these days. These guys have got PDAs, that laser rangefinders and handheld computers to calculate the Coriolis effect of the Earth's rotation, the kind of effect that that's going to have on the bullet. They've got the exact range to the target with laser rangefinders. It's a science of shooting. But when Hathcock was doing it, it wasn't a science, it was an art. He didn't have a laser rangefinder. He couldn't calculate the effect that the Earth's rotation was going to have on his shot. He did it all through experience, skill, and instinct. And that's what made Hathcock so... I mean, the fact is that Hathcock shot, his record stood for over 30 years. And pretty much everybody who's beaten the record did it in the 21st century, with 21st century technology. That's what made Carlos Hathcock's shot so special. The snipers that have followed him are, you know, fantastic marksmen. No question about it whatsoever. They're absolutely superb shots, but they're absolutely superb shots with all kinds of modern technology on their side. But when Carlos Hathcock was plying his trade in the jungles of Southeast Asia, he was doing it with nothing more complicated than a bolt-action rifle and a hunting scope. And when he set his world record 2,500 yard shot, he wasn't even using that. He did it with an M2 50 caliber machine gun that he'd modified himself to be able to take a sniper scope. These days it's not unusual to see M2s mounted on tripods with scopes mounted on top of them, but back then Hathcock basically had to build his own. The man was amazing. Not sure what good he'd be in a bar fight. Well, then again, he was a US Marine gunnery sergeant, so he's probably going to be pretty good in a bar fight, but when it came to long-range shooting, if he was still alive today, imagine what he could achieve with today's technology. Well, anyway, not long to go before the end of the video. Let's try and get more than one question answered this week. Next question comes from Dare Gaming. He has his own YouTube channel, and he's thinking of putting up World of Tanks and War Thunder videos. However, he wants to monetize his channel and make a bit of money out of it, and wants to know if there's any potential copyright issues with Wargaming or Gaijin. And, well, no, basically. In fact, Wargaming, certainly Wargaming EU, have gone as far as saying that if anybody wants to put World of Tanks videos up on YouTube and runs into any kind of copyright problems, then get in touch and they will be only too happy to sort it out for you. Next up, I received a message a couple of days ago from one of the guys who was the subject of one of the clips in my latest Good, the Bad and the Ugly video. The clip in question was a platoon of an IS-7 and a T-57 Heavy, and there was a storm of controversy in the comments section of that video. The too long didn't read version is the IS-7 team killed a friendly medium tank so that he could get the top gun on the last remaining enemy tank that needed killing. And pretty much everybody universally agreed that the IS-7 was an arsehole. What caused all the controversy was to do with the T-57 Heavy driver. And I'll say controversial, it wasn't really controversy. The T-57 Heavy driver was an arsehole as well. What was controversial was the number of other arseholes who tried to say that he didn't do anything wrong. And I went absolutely crazy with a banhammer in the comments section of that video, and completely unrepentant about it, because if you've seen the video and you thought the T-57 Heavy driver was justified in attempting and failing to team kill the AT-15 in that video, then you're an arsehole too, and I don't want you to have anything to do with my YouTube channel. But here's the thing. The T-57 Heavy driver posted countless responses in the comments section of that video, in true internet keyboard warrior fashion, trying to justify what he did and take everybody on in a fight if they disagreed with it. The IS-7 driver stayed pretty quiet, at least until a couple of days ago when he sent me this message. Yes, I do stupid things. Yes, I can be an asshole, and like any Unicum player, I can rage because sometimes it just feels like you're the only one thinking about team play, and sometimes I do get pissed if the way people play suggests that they're intentionally trying to rob me of a Top Gun. I might just be human like that, but as a human I instantly regretted doing that as soon as the battle ended. Fuck, maybe I am a wanker. Those are his exact words. And you know what? I have so much respect for that guy, because he didn't try to hide behind his internet keyboard. He came right out and said, yeah, you're right, I am a wanker. And I'm sorry for it, but this is why I did it. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not saying it's right. It's not right, it's wrong. But this is why I did it, and I'm sorry I did it. And I have so much respect for that guy. The T-57 Heavy driver, oh, he can die in a fire, and so can anybody who agrees with him. But the IS-7 driver, I mean, I understand. Back when I used to do Wanker of the Week, I even highlighted myself as Wanker of the Week once, when in a fit of rage I team killed an AFKer who wasn't helping me out in a tough fight. Of course the inevitable comments in that video were, oh, Jingles, he says you shouldn't do this, but apparently it's alright when he does it. No, it's not alright when I do it. That's why I was Wanker of the Week in that episode of Mingles with Jingles. And that's why, despite the fact that of the two players involved in that particular clip, the T-57 Heavy driver who tried and failed to team kill an AT-15 who he claims was blocking him, and an IS-7 driver who deliberately team killed a medium tank driver so that he could get a Top Gun, of the two of them, I've got more respect for the one that everybody thought was a cockholster, the guy in the IS-7. His name was Ryager, because unlike the T57 heavy driver, he didn't immediately try to hide behind his keyboard and pretend that what he did was justified. What he did was wrong, he knew it was wrong, he regretted it, and he said so. And I have so much more respect for him because of that. And on that bombshell, and this dead Jagdtiger, come on, there he is. That's it for this week's Mingles with Jingles. As always, take care on that battlefield, have fun playing whatever you're playing, and I'll catch you next time.